Would you support eliminating the tax breaks to companies that ship jobs overseas?
Oh, absolutely. I think there are ways to go about doing that, and I think that we have been, both with our trade policies and with the kinds of subsidies that we've given companies that do that, we've been going in the wrong direction. I sit on the national board of an organization called Walmart Watch, and one of the reasons I got interested was because of the site fights that you know, happen in communities where they don't want to see all the business driven out of town and want to keep it on Main Street. But one of my other concerns is the fact that there are something like 15,000 factories in China that produce only for Walmart. And what that means is those goods are made out of this country, no labor standards, no environmental standards, or none that are enforced. Then they're put on container ships and brought back to this country, so the transportation costs are excessively high. The pollution from the coal-fired power plant gets back to America, and then they're driven all over our country, taken to facilities where, yes, people might pay a little bit less, but the employees are underpaid. They use the Medicaid system for the health care costs. I mean, everything about it is the wrong business model, and I think that's part of what we have to change.
Why do you think the U.S. dollar is on a steady decline?
Well, I won't pretend that I'm a sophisticated economist and able to, know all of the arguments here, but some of it is the lack of confidence in the American economy. I mean, we're spending $400 million a day on a war that we can't afford. We're borrowing that money. I mean, look what happened when Citibank, one of the first banks to start to have serious problems because of this sort of credit scam that was going on in the subprime market, they went to China and said, help bail us out, and China said, you kidding? Why invest in your economy? I mean, we have put ourselves in the worst possible economic situation, and I think that, Congress and this administration is very much at fault.
Describe your plan to bring jobs here to Maine.
Well, I think there are a variety of ways to go about doing it, and as, again, someone who owns a small business and has worked much of my life in the rural economy, I'd like to see a lot of the money come back to small communities where people want to live, where they want to raise their children, and where people are very interested in the traditional industries of Maine. Agriculture, fishing industries, what we talk about the green economy, investing in wind power, tidal power, retrofitting the houses in Maine so they're more energy efficient. You have some of the oldest housing stock in the nation. If we went back to some of the tax credits that were available before, I think that would do a lot for construction. I think that there are a variety of sustainable industries like ecotourism. People want to come to places like Maine where there is a different kind of quality of life. I think that could make a huge difference. I had another good idea and I'm just temporarily forgetting it, but I just think that we are in the right place at the right time, and a little bit of federal investment in a state like ours would make a huge difference in the long run.
With gas prices rising to near $4 a gallon and record profits at the oil companies, do you believe that gas gouging is a real problem in this country?
Oh, I do, yeah. And I think, again, the sooner we can look at energy alternatives, make it easier for people to purchase hybrid vehicles, and frankly, if in the long run we could invest in public transportation. I mean, a lot of people have moved to Maine who still have reasons to commute to work in Boston, or just want an easy way in and out of the state, and if we had high-speed rail or even dependable rail up and down the coast, it would be great for the tourism business, but also for people who need to, to get to the southern part of this of New England, and could save a lot in gas not having to do that in their car.
How do we achieve energy independence?
Well, I think by a variety of ways, and certainly investing in alternative energy. Mm-hmm. There have been proposals to put wind farms both inland Maine and also offshore Maine, allowing people to have either some subsidies or credits to do much more with their own homes. And retrofitting their homes. And then I think, again, sort of rethinking about how we purchase goods. Being able to buy locally, produce, farm-raised goods. I was talking to someone the other day who runs one of the biggest construction companies in New York, and he said, he is now paying more for transportation to get construction materials to his facility than he paid for the original good. Well, what about reopening some of those places in Maine where we used to mill logs and make plywood and do a lot of things that have now been shipped offshore? I could see this as a time of a real turnaround.
With that, we're going to take a short break, but when Youth in Politics return, we're going to talk about education and healthcare. Don't go away. Welcome back to Youth in Politics. I'm Justin Chenette, and again I'm joined with Chellie Pingree, who's Democratic congressional candidate. Let me read a quote from your website. We need to fix our broken healthcare system. I am deeply troubled that we continue to have a healthcare system that, unlike every other industrialized country in the world, is unaffordable to a large percentage of individuals and small businesses and is increasingly bankrupting our country. How would you make healthcare affordable?
Well, I would like to see a single-payer healthcare system. I mean, we're the only industrialized nation in the world that doesn't have some variation on that. We pay twice as much as most other countries for our healthcare costs, yet many of our measures don't look very good. And I will say, you know, I've been working on this issue for about 15 years since I first got elected to the legislature in a variety of ways. And what I'd say is the conversation has changed completely. You know, there used to be a lot of reluctance for change. Now I meet doctors who want to work under a different system, business owners. You know, the average small business owner pays as much for health care costs for their employees as they earn in profit every year. And individuals who say, you know, I have insurance, but it wasn't there when I needed it, or I have to have a $10,000 deductible. It just isn't working. And for a long time, people would say, well, how are you going to pay for it? I think it's actually time to start saying, how are we going to keep affording the system we've got, which doesn't work and doesn't cover everybody? So I think it's time we buck up and we have a single-payer system. I really think that the will be there after this election, and if we have a Democrat in the White House and Democrats controlling both the House and the Senate, and we don't do something in the first year about universal health care, we actually just won't deserve to govern. I mean, people won't trust us again.
Senator Clinton proposed a $110 billion health care reform package. How much would the single-payer system cost?
I doubt that it would cost much more when you really come down to it. I mean, H.R. 676, which is the bill currently before Congress, and it's a single-payer system, allows for 15 years both to study and integrate the system. So it's not something that you have to do overnight. And again, I would say we're spending so much of this money now, but it's all cost shifted. You know, if you have health care coverage, chances are you're helping to pay the coverage of all the uninsured who still have to be treated at a hospital or still have to get some kind of care. So much of America today is covered under Medicaid, Medicare, a variety of programs that are already out there. I think this is just an acknowledgement that we need to have a sensible plan that covers everybody, gives people good preventative care, and doesn't just force people to, you know, use the system when they're most desperate, but all along when we can make sure we keep people healthier and we cover everybody.
Let's turn to education. How would you strengthen our school system to make the U.S. more competitive around the world in terms of educational results and testing results?
Well, I don't like No Child Left Behind, and I think that the current administration's idea that we would develop a very small range of tests and then have teachers teach to the test, penalize those schools that aren't doing well, just doesn't make any sense to me. I come from a very small community in the district. I've lived most of my life in the town of North Haven. We actually have the smallest high school in the state of Maine, and I was the chair of the local school board. So education has been critical to me. I went to a public school. My children went to public schools. I think public education is really sort of the most fundamental right in a democracy. It's the best way that we make sure that everybody has an opportunity and that we all, you know, have a chance to do well. We have not been making the investment in public education, and this administration in particular. As I said, they wanted to set up a limited set of criteria that don't recognize the difference in communities, and they didn't want to spend enough money to support it. Here in the state of Maine, if the federal government just paid for the 40% of the special ed mandate that they agreed to do instead of something like 17% that they, you know, that they currently do. So they're supposed to pay 40, they do about 17. That's worth about $70 million in our state. You know, here you got a state, I know my daughter is a state legislator, and they've struggled to balance the budget. A lot of that is because of the cost of education. If the federal government just paid more out to the states, we could compensate our teachers better, we could strengthen our programs, we could have better school facilities. I think it's crazy we don't make that investment.
Would you repeal No Child Left Behind?
Absolutely. I have very little interest in it. And you know, Maine had pretty interesting and relatively good teaching standards and testing to begin with, and they were much better suited to what we see as what we want education to look like in Maine. But I don't think that tests necessarily always reflect how well an education is proceeding. I think there are better ways to do it.
High school students in Maine and around the nation are worried about the rising cost of college. How can you make college affordable?
Well, again, another very reasonable investment for the federal government to make. you know, I think the statistic is that Maine has a very high rate of high school graduation and a very low rate of young people who go on to college. And a lot of it is because of their fear of accumulating the debt, but also a tradition in a lot of families where there isn't the money available to put into your kids' education. And for many people, you know, you do that by getting a second loan on your house or a home equity loan. Well, today in the mortgage market, that's not easy for many families to do. So making college costs more affordable, and I think making more grants available to young people who want to go into college. There are a lot of good ideas around this and a lot of good programs out there. Again, I would say it is a far better investment than what this particular government has been investing my money in.